I can hear every small detail. I like to pretend I know what I'm doing as a sound engineer.
You know more than I do.
Well.
Doesn't take much, though.
Oh, boy.
You wanna give us another mouth trumpet?
Oh, yeah.
Or like a, I don't know, you play other instruments, like a mouth oboe?
That's difficult.
Okay, mouth trumpet.
Welcome to episode 2.
Welcome to episode 2 of the podcast Andalus at the intersection of music and myth. My name is Lauren Buss. I'll be your host, and I'm joined by the oboe, saxophone, trumpet. What other instruments do you have? Extraordinaire.
I don't know.
Moriah Jensen. Can we edit in clapping sounds here?
No.
And the crowd goes wild.
No.
So, to start off, I'm just going to do a little recap of what we learned last time in case this is the first episode you were joining us for. I would encourage you to go back and listen to the previous one.
I love a good recap.
But yeah, a little refresher for you and the listeners. So, we talked a lot about last time about how history is intertwined with bias. It's not just like straightforward facts. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time it becomes more myth than truth. Hence the title of the...
Oh my god.
It all makes sense now, the podcast.
A full circle moment.
Right. But it's like, it's a story told from a particular perspective, and it's not a 365-degree picture. And that's certainly the case with research surrounding the music of medieval Iberia, which is what we're diving into. Bit of a history refresher that we talked about. So, prior to the year 711, that was a good year. Do you remember it?
Yes. No. I'm only 22.
Oh, you're older than me. So, 711. Prior to that time, the Iberian Peninsula, which is what we know today as Spain and Portugal, was controlled by the Visigothic kingdom, which is essentially a Germanic Christian kingdom. And then in 711, in just a handful of years, the Muslims from North Africa conquered the entire peninsula, just in the blink of an eye. Does that snap nice?
Stop it.
It was a little too loud. And it was conquered by the Umayyad Caliphate, which I mispronounced last time. I just want to clarify. So that is the Muslim dynasty that was in power in North Africa at that time. The Umayyad Caliphate, which is just that like state, the power. And the Iberian Peninsula, the areas controlled by the Muslims, became known as Al-Andalus. Until it was gradually reconquered by the Christian kingdoms back from the north. But that took a really long time.
Yes.
And the Umayyad dynasty didn't fall until 1031. But even after that, the borders continued to fluctuate, and the Muslims continued to live in parts of Spain constantly until, present-day Spain, until 1492, when, the Reconquista, the reconquest, was completed. So, it took a few years for them to conquer the entire peninsula, and just, 780 more for them to take it back.
I wonder how the land must have been very good for them to all be fighting over it.
I don't know.
I don't know.
We're gonna find out when we go there.
Ooh. Oh yeah, we're going there. Shout out to Spain and France tour, knock on wood. We're actually going.
With our wind orchestra. Woo! So, with that, there's this debate whether or not Al-Andalus impacted the course of Western classical music. And I'm in the camp of yes, it did have an impact, based on some of the evidence we found. And today we're going to dive into some of that evidence supporting this stance. I know, it's exciting. But first, do you have a shout out for today?
Well, I just shouted out the tour, so I guess that's our shout out. Yeah. I hope we get to go.
That will be nice. Gustavus Wind Orchestra touring to Spain and France.
Woo.
Check out the
Knock
Facebook page.
Again.
So life in Al-Andalus. I'll give you a little picture. It's definitely not. It wasn't a simple place to live. It wasn't just like one population of people, because There were Muslims, Christians, and a lot of Jews also living in the Iberian Peninsula during this time. It wasn't like the Visigoths were living there and they, like, in this apartment, they got kicked out and there was a new tenant and, the Maya dynasty was there now. Instead, what happened, I actually read a lot of treaties where as the Muslims conquered each area, they set up these treaties where Christians were allowed to stay and they were protected under Muslim rule, so long as they, agreed to play nice and, they gave their loyalty to the dynasty and paid an annual tax, but they were guaranteed safety and they retained their right to practice their religion. So, sometimes there was peace, sometimes there was conflict, but regardless, they lived in the same place together. So it's definitely a complex array of peoples, and then it became more complicated over time because there were a lot of conversions of people from Islam to Christianity, or vice versa. And there was a blending of languages. Lots of people were fluent in both Arabic and the colloquial Latin of the time. So it fluctuated a lot because they lived together and, not always peacefully, but because they lived together, they had to be able to communicate with each other. So there was a blending of religions, of languages, of peoples, a very complex place. Yeah. And so with so much contact, the odds are high that the cultures also blended a bit, And first, I want to take a look at the architecture of the area. Good building. I know, you're going to get some pictures soon. Pictures? I know. It's a picture book today.
What are the listeners going to do? They can't see.
You'll have to do some research on your own.
I'll just describe them as best I can.
So, this made me think, when I was thinking about the blending of cultures, I thought back to my Spanish class, and that I had taken, I referenced this in our previous episode about the faces of Spain, and I learned about there's a lot of physical remnants of Al-Andalus still in Spain today. And one of those examples is the Mosque-Cathedral of Córdoba. Which, it's a mosque cathedral, which is already like, there's already a blending happening that you can just tell from the name. So, I'll take you back in time. Thank you for the sound effects.
That was my rewind sound. Nice. I don't think it worked.
So, essentially, we are back in Visigothic times, in the 5th century. They built this church in this location, San Vicente. And you can actually still see some of the remains in the structure today. Oh. And then it was conquered by the Muslims in the early 8th century, which is, I always get confused. 8th century is 700s.
Yes, correct. I also get confused, but yes.
Yes. Yep. So early on, right after they initially came into the Iberian Peninsula, and according to some accounts, they actually split this church in half. So you have half a mosque and half a Christian church. Oh my goodness. So,
that's crazy.
It's like when my parents had to divide everything evenly between my brother and I, and you get this half and you get this half of the couch and no crossing. Right. So, physically within the structure. Wow. There was that cohabitation. Yeah. Even though, it was separate. But then you have 70 years later, it was actually torn down and then rebuilt just as a mosque, and it took over 2 centuries to build. Oh, I was reading about this. It's crazy. It was like a whole industry was created surrounding the construction of this building. Wow. And it became the second most important mosque in the world after Mecca. That's how big of a deal this place is.
Wow. That's interesting because I've never heard of it.
Right.
Like you'd think with such an importance we'd hear about it more, but
I guess not. I had not heard of it until I took this class either.
Interesting.
So the mosque's most notable feature, as I read about, is its prayer hall, and it has it's gigantic. The ceiling is supported by 856 columns of a bunch of different kinds of expensive fancy stones that I'm not going to try to pronounce.
Wait, can I try?
Yeah, go for it.
Jasper, onyx, marble, granite, and porphyry. I want to know what that looks like. I'll look it up later.
The prayer hall looks like this.
Oh.
You want to describe that to our listeners, Maria?
Imagine lots and lots of pillars with arches between them that look like candy canes. And it's very beautiful. Very ornate, very intricate. Huh.
And you can't even see, like, the back wall.
Right.
You know, from any of the pictures, just because it's so huge. So, it gets even more interesting because when Córdoba was reconquered by the Christians in 1236, instead of demolishing the structure, they actually decided to build a cathedral on the very inside of the prayer hall. Oh. So you can see in some of these pictures.
I was gonna say, like, that looks like something I would see at a Catholic church.
Right. If you zoom into some of these pictures, you can actually see in the back the entrance to the cathedral.
Oh, wow.
They just built another building inside the building.
That's very interesting.
And so
how nice of them.
Right. So there's literally a place for the Christian worship inside of the mosque.
They just
prayer
didn't
hall.
want to take another 2 centuries to build a brand new building.
Right. So, I mean, it's like this physical, lasting combination of the Muslim culture and the, you know, like the Renaissance Christian architecture.
For sure.
Switching over from architecture, we have some literature examples too. We have, I read this story. It's called A Tale of Romance and Elegant Society by someone whose name I'm not going to attempt to pronounce.
I'm also not going to attempt.
It was written in Arabic right around the year 1200, give or take a few decades, which, I mean, in the course of what we're talking about, a few decades isn't that long. And it's a love story between an Andalusi slave girl and a Syrian merchant's son. And it's kind of unusual for Arabic love stories. The tale has a happy ending, and they reunite, and it's all cute. And I mean, that's more characteristic of the like European tradition of storytelling in this time. Of that would maybe come from like France or something like that. Sure. So although lots of the elements of the story come from Arabic literary practices, this story also suggests contact with like the Romance traditions, and things like that. We're not going to have you read any of that, but there is reading coming up. Oh, okay. Don't worry. Get your reading voice ready.
I didn't have tea this morning. I only had coffee, so
we'll see. You'll do great. So we have some poetry. There were 2 types of poetry that I read about that were actually invented in Al-Andalus, which means they didn't come from North Africa. They didn't come from any of the Christian kingdoms. Like they were unique to this blending of cultures. And we have the Muasha and the Zejel. They're both invented in Al-Andalus, and they both include a combination of colloquial Arabic and the like Romance Latin languages within the poems. So there's that blending of languages within the writing. I'm gonna have you read a little bit of it. Ooh. My big book. This is a very big book. This is from Medieval Iberia: Readings from Christian, Muslim, and Jewish Sources. Huh.
Okay. So just that section?
Yeah. Go for it.
I would fly, yet I find no place to take flight. O Kaaba, to which all hearts journey forth, torn by passion that calls and answering love, you call on a sinner returning to you. Here I am, I need not the words of the spy. Allow me to travel and worship therein, make no excuse. My heart is the gift and my tears are the stones. Welcome is he, though he expose me to death. One supple of waist and languid of eye, O hardness of heart which love sees as soft, you have caused me to learn that thoughts can think ill.
So it gets a little spicy there at the end.
Yeah, it made me slightly uncomfortable.
I didn't have you read the other parts. You would have been far more uncomfortable, and we would have had to take off the "this is safe for children" rating. So there's some romantic themes.
Yes.
Characteristic of these kinds of poetry. That was specifically a Muasha example. And their romantic themes have led to some speculation regarding maybe they influenced. We learned about the troubadours.
Yes.
In France, which are like the traveling poets and singers. And there's some speculation of this kind of poetry potentially impacting their poetry.
Okay.
So we see right. So we see the blending of the Muslim like literary practices and the Christian like European practices coming together and then coming out and influencing Western Europe artistic traditions. Yeah. But wait, there's more. These two types of poetry are actually also styles of music. So when the poetry is sung, which often happened, it's music. And we have a lot of evidence pointing to the fact that this music of the Moshe and Zejel changed the course of Western music history. Okay. And that's where we're going to end this episode.
No! Another cliffhanger.
I know, it's another cliffhanger.
Bro.
I gotta get you to come back. So I hope you join us for episode 3, where we're gonna dive into, the nitty-gritty of the musical influences. So we took a look at, the architecture, the literature, the poetry. We're gonna dive into the musical influences of Al-Andalus on Western music history. And we're gonna get to do some listening next time. So I hope you all join us for our next episode of Al-Andalus at the intersection of music and myth.
It'll get better, maybe. I don't know. Bye.